37 minutes until the aerial bombing of Undisclosed. Shit, wait, I'm gonna redo this. Let me reduce the gain here. Just a bit. Okay. 37 minutes until the aerial bombing of Undisclosed. We were hauled under a tent, an open one like you'd see at a county fair. There were two long folding tables, and along the back of the tent, just outside of the rain, were a series of carts holding stainless steel canisters. There were two spacemen right behind us, holding some kind of weapons on us that I didn't recognize. They were bulky and ended in some kind of slanted lens thing. I kind of wanted to get shot with one just to see what it did. Then, 50 feet or so outside the tent, were a dozen gunmen with regular old military-grade assault rifles. I was 100% sure that their instructions were that if we overpowered the two guards next to us, they were to turn everything, including the guards, into the finale of Bonnie and Clyde. Tennant strode up from behind us and handed Amy a towel. Not sure why John and I didn't get one. Tennant said, "I have good news and bad news. The good news is that we are, of course, outside of the blast radius. Though close enough that the noise will be very, very loud, unless someone at the Air Combat Command has made a grievous error in their calculations. A series of 25,000 bombs will be dropped from the back of a C-130 aircraft, starting from the center of town outward, in a series of concentric circles. The shock wave from each bomb can shatter 10 city blocks and liquefy any organism standing within 1,000 feet in any direction. Once all the structures have been blown into kindling, a second squadron of B-52 bombers will drop a series of 1,000-pound CBU-97 incendiary cluster munitions, releasing a flammable aerosol that will ignite and raise the temperature at the center of town to a temperature hotter than the surface of the sun. The resulting conflagration will inhale so much surrounding oxygen that from here we'll feel like we're in a monsoon. Winds will reach 50 miles an hour. I'm told the noise of all the air rushing to feed the massive open-air furnace sounds like the world itself is howling in anguish. It should really be something." John said, "And let me guess, you're going to jerk off while you're watching it, and you're going to make us watch you." Amy was actually using the towel to dry her hair, and I felt like she should have just left it wet out of solidarity. Ignoring John, Tennant said, "That's the good news. The bad news is that you are, of course, being charged for this session." He went back to the row of steel canisters and examined them. "I kid, of course." I said, "So how do you get into the supervillain business anyway? Is it something that happens gradually, or do you just wake up and decide to go for it?" Tennant said, "I'm going to let you in a little secret, and I apologize ahead of time because learning this will mark the end of your extended childhood. Nobody involved in a conflict thinks they're the villain. And considering I'm on the verge of saving a couple of billion lives, I'm thinking I deserve hero status in this one, even if you're too short-sighted to understand." I said, "Uh-huh. So who is the bad guy, then?" "Everyone, depending on the day. In this case, I don't know who is responsible for the parasite. That is, I don't know their names. This is what you can't or aren't willing to understand. You found a cockroach in your hamburger. You want a two-word answer to the question of who put it there. Well, it's not that simple. Was it the kid working the grill who didn't check the beef? Was it the franchise owner for buying beef from a shady supplier? Was it the slaughterhouse for failing to adhere to contamination standards? Was it the government for not funding FDA enforcement of those standards? Or was it you, the customer, for demanding lower taxes that resulted in the funding being cut, and for participating in a consumer culture that rewards cutting corners? Well, in that scenario, think of me as the harried assistant manager who has to apologize to the unhappy customer and try to keep the restaurant from getting shut down. Only here, the restaurant is all of civilization." I said, "Okay, Wait, what does the hamburger represent again?" "My point is, I have a job, just like you. I get a paycheck, I get memos. Just like you, I have superiors, and they have superiors who I am not allowed to speak to. Orders filter down from on high, arriving at my level stripped entirely of all context or rationale or justification. Orders do not come with an illustration of how they serve the overall goals of the organization. Same as any other job. Was the parasite released intentionally? And if so, for what purpose? It is not my job to know. All I know is that it is a near certainty that if it gets out, it will destabilize civilization as we know it. I have worked non-stop since the outbreak to contain this in a way that would let the world move on. And, I am proud to say, I'm on the verge of succeeding. Amy said, by killing everyone. No, not everyone. One medium-sized town. Some perspective helps here. Globally, 150,000 people die every day, from natural causes, accidents, war. The population of this town will be barely a blip in the worldwide dying that happens in an average month. So while you think you're being heroic in saving it, you are, right now, in this situation, the villains. I know you don't think you are, but you are. I said, then why are you the only one giving the supervillain monologue? He walked back to the silver canisters. He put his back to us and started messing with some mechanism and whatever mad scientist setup he had back there. I heard liquid running. We were not restrained in our chairs, but there were so many guns on us that if I scratched my nose, the shooting aftermath would look like somebody just spilled a huge lasagna here. I looked at Amy, who was impassive, and then at John, who looked like he was mentally running through escape options just like I was. The fur gun was still laying in the grass where we had landed when we arrived. They probably thought it was a hairbrush. I pictured John trying to wrestle away one of those futuristic lens guns the two guards behind us were carrying. Then I pictured him squeezing the trigger and a cartoon boxing glove popping out of the end. I watched Tenet work fluids from his steel canisters and wondered if he weren't choosing between quick death under a hail of bullets or something much, much worse caused by whatever he was brewing up there. He turned back to us, striding calmly our way. He placed 3 small styrofoam cups in front of us. We have sugar over there, but I'm afraid we're out of creamer. Coffee. I left mine in front of me. Amy, without asking, had been given a cup of hot water and a tea bag. She dropped in the tea bag and asked Tenet if he had any honey. She is terrible at this. Tenet walked back to the coffee carts and returned with a container of honey shaped like a bear. He said, think, who allowed the outbreak to occur? Who failed to report the appearance of the parasite to any authorities? Who prevented any containment at your house? Who created the breach at the Reaper Command Center? Who created the breach in the quarantine containment fence? Who has single-handedly spread this infection? John said, we didn't do any of it on purpose, we're just not very good at things. Or, it could be that just maybe, one can act on what one believes is his own agency, while in reality, perfectly serving the purposes of another. He held up the honey bear. Where do you think this comes from? Do you think the bees toiled night and day to make this because they knew we were going to take it away from them and drip it into our tea? Of course not, because we are a higher life form than they. We can make them serve our purposes while letting them believe they are serving their own. You have been used like bees. He glanced at me. This was all but explained to you before. Another spacesuit walked in out of the rain and went and got a cup of coffee from the coffee carts. I wondered how he was going to drink it. Tenet continued, don't get me wrong. I know why you think what you think. I have sons in their 20s. I was there myself once, believe it or not. Because you have no responsibilities, you get to sit back, in school or at your inconsequential service job, and judge the grown-ups and the impossible choices we have to make. Of course, if you were in our position, you would never go to war, or lay off a factory full of workers, or enlist the help of one murderous dictator to stop another who's even worse. All moral choices seem easy when you don't actually have to make them. Amy shook her head slowly and said, you can't talk your way into this being anything other than mass murder. And people are going to know. Tenet said, what exactly do you think they're going to know? That the people in the town are just people. That this isn't so clear-cut. They're going to know. Even if someone decided that the infection rate down there was something less than 100%, and if they could go to a mountaintop and shout it to the world, it wouldn't matter. Because the people want this. They want their neighbors to be monsters. It's why we lust over news stories of mothers murdering their children, and run after conspiracy theories about a government full of greedy sociopaths. If the monsters didn't come, we would have willed them into existence. John nodded and said, just so they have an excuse to sue the burger place. I said, you're several steps behind here. Amy sipped her tea and said, the people out there won't believe it if they don't have a choice. If they see for themselves. Tenet calmly said, I know you came here to try to take out the warlock jammer. As the villains in this story, that's exactly what I expected you to do. This would be why we have an entire army protecting it. Amy said, speaking of which, The guys standing right behind us with the weird guns, do they know that you're going to have them killed, too? There's no way you can let all these people wandering around here in their spacesuits just go back home tomorrow, knowing what you did here. Somebody will talk, right? To their wife or their kids, or maybe they go online and blog about it. Maybe cash in on a book deal. Do they know you're going to orchestrate something for them, just like you did for the town? Tennant said, I like you. I do. But think about all the assumptions you just made. First, you assume that the men behind you could hear you. Second, you assume that the men behind you have ears at all. Third, you assume that the men behind you are even men. Would you like to know what's under the hoods of these decontamination suits? The spacesuit backed by the coffee turned toward us. He sat his coffee on the cart and approached our table. Tennant didn't turn to look at him. Whatever was inside the spacesuit reached up and started undoing clasps around the neck of its red-tinted face mask. Then it pulled open a zipper. The gloved hands then raised and grabbed the sides of its helmet and lifted.